good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. No matter what time it is that you're watching this, the truth is, you came here because you've been remembering. And you're like, I've got to hear more. So your inner being said, here, you gotta come listen to this. So this morning, or whatever time it is you're watching this, I want to speak about one of the most important truths a human being can actually ever remember. You know, there are prisons made of iron, right? And there are prisons made of memory and perceptions. And then there are prisons of perception where no chains are needed because the mind itself has accepted the walls that are already there, even locks itself within its own prison cell. See, this is a great deception. The bondage must be visible in order to be real, they think. But some of the deepest captivities is actually invisible itself. Some people are not locked in cells. Some people are not locked in cells of metal. They are locked in cells of identities. They are locked in shame. They're locked in trauma. And they're locked in inherited fear, in mental noise, and need to perform, and need to be approved, of the need to belong to systems that's never intended to make them free in the first place. And so the soul whispers, this is not home. That whisper is sacred. You see, that whisper is the beginning of awakening, because something within us remembers. Something within us knows that we were never created to live in separation from truth. In my book, Awaken, Return to Eden, when I wrote, the moment we stop seeing ourselves as prisoners, the prison ceases to exist. And paradise was never lost. How's it going? It was hidden behind the veil of perception, and now we remember. That is not a poetic line. That is a map. Because the prison is not always outside of us. Often the prison is a story we have accepted about even ourselves. Accepted the stories that says we are too broken, too damaged, too late, too wounded to heal, too small to matter, too separate to belong. But that story is not the truth. Not at all. It's just our perceptions of what has imprisoned us in the first place. It's a construct. It's a layer. It's a distortion. And the moment you see it for what it is, it begins to lose its power over you. We call it the hidden prison. I call it the shadow matrix. Most people think freedom means doing whatever you want. But real freedom is not the absence of restraint. See, real freedom is the absence of inner captivity. And you can live in a beautiful house and still be trapped. You can have all the finances in the world and still be trapped. How's it going? You can have money. You can and still be stuck. You can have platforms and still be trapped. You can be the biggest guru and still be trapped. You can have people around you and still be trapped. Because if your mind is still governed by fear, approval, reactivity, and shame, then the prison has simply changed shape, that's all. And this is why many beings live in cycles. We have patterns in our lives. We repeat we repeat what wounds us. We defend what harms us. And we chase what neglects us. And we become attached to what drains them. And we call that survival. But see, survival is not the same as life. Survival is what the body does when it believes danger is permanent. Life is what the soul does when it remembers truth. Psychology tells us that repeated stress can train the nervous system into constant vigilance and response. See, the body learns fear. The brain learns patterns. The subconscious learns repetition. And after long enough, what was once an event becomes an identity. And that's why healing is not only about remembering what happened. It is about disentangling from what we became in response to what happened. And that's deep work. That's sacred work. That's holy work. That's awakening. See, the assimilation of this self. As I wrote about this in my book, Awaken, Return to Eden, when I described the world as shaped by perception and the mind as the center of the illusion. I wrote that the separation was perceived from one another, from creation, from the divine, is nothing more than a veil. That is important because it points to the central lie that human life is separate. We're taught separation everywhere. The religion teaches us that we're separate from God, separate from nature, separate from our bodies, separate from another, separate from our own soul. And once separation is believed, everything else follows. I don't know. It just seems to stick. I haven't done anything special, to be honest. So fear follows. Control follows. Comparison follows. Competition follows. And shame follows. Violence follows. Religion becomes control. Relationship becomes transaction. Identity becomes armor. Because once a person believes they are cut off from source, they will spend their life trying to replace what they think they lost. That is why people chase status. That is why people chase money. That is why people chase bodies. That is why people chase attention. There isn't a single man-made religion out there that I would say I like. That is why people chase religion without revelation and spirituality without embodiment. They are trying to fill a hole that was never meant to be filled externally. The hole is not proof of deficiency, it is proof of memory. It is the ache of the soul remembering home. See, what science confirms is science in its own language points to some of these truths. The nervous system can be conditioned by trauma. The brain can be rewired by repeated experience. Attention changes perception. Perception changes behavior. Behavior changes identity. And that means we are not fixed. It means we are not doomed to repeat every story we inherited. See, neuroplasticity shows us that the brain can change. Psychology shows us that the meanings shape behavior, and the body shows us that stress can become stored patterns. And if pattern can be learned, a pattern can be unlearned. And this is hope. That is freedom. That is why the seeker cannot be passive. Awakening is not something that happens just because we wish for it. It is something that happens when we become willing to observe ourselves honestly. What am I feeding? What am I repeating? What am I calling truth that is really only habit? What am I protecting that is actually hurting me? What have I mistaken for myself? And those questions break open the false self, the soul's resistance. There is always a point in the journey where the soul begins to resist the false arrangement. You may call it grief. You may call it anxiety. You may call it exhaustion. You may even call it crisis. But sometimes what we call crisis is actually consciousness refusing to remain asleep. It's saying no more. Something in the chest starts to say no. No to the roles. No to the performance. No to the false peace. No to little identity that was built to survive but not thrive. That resistance is not rebellion against life. It is a rebellion against distortion. It is the divine within saying, I was not made for this. And that is why many awakenings begin after collapse, after heartbreak, after loss, after death, after the life you knew no longer works. Because when the old structure falls, the soul finally has room to speak. The body remembers. And I wrote about this in Return to Eden when I spoke about chaos, trauma, and the body keeping score, and that is a truth many people have lived but not yet named. The body remembers. The shoulders remember, the stomach remembers, the breath remembers. The skin even remembers. The heartbeat remembers, and the nervous system remembers who it had to become in order to survive. And if we do not bring love, awareness, and truth to those memories, then the body will keep carrying the past as if it is still happening. And that is why so many people react from old wounds. They are not responding only to present moments. They are responding to every moment that was never integrated. That is why compassion matters. That is why patience matters. That's why solitude matters. That's why stillness matters. Stillness gives the body room to stop bracing. Stillness gives the mind room to stop performing. Stillness gives the soul room to speak. The desert is one of the places that for me was one of the most life-changing places. I've always believed the desert is a teacher. Because the desert strips away from illusion. It removes access, it quiets the false self, and it takes away the noise until only what is real is there. And I wrote about this in my book. The desert does that. It takes away all the noise until that remains is truth. And that is one of the most powerful truths that I walk through, is just spending so much time in the wilderness, because it is not only about a place, it was about a process. See, the desert is any space in your life where distractions are removed. It is any season where you can no longer hide behind activity. It is any season where the soul must face itself honestly. And while that can feel painful, it is also a mercy. Because what is false cannot survive the desert forever. The desert burns away performance. The desert burns away superficial identity. The desert burns away dependency on applause. And the desert burns away spiritual theater. The desert leaves you with what is real. Hi. And what is real is often quieter than we expected. I wrote about this in my book, Awaken, Return to Eden, because it was one of the most important revelations of my life, is the kingdom of God is within you. And that's no suggestion. It's a revelation. And it means sacred is not far away. It means the divine is not locked in a distant heaven. It means the search outside of yourself will never be enough. And it means that the place you have been trying to reach has already been placed inside of you. And that is why so many people feel exhausted. They are living as if they must earn what was already given. They are performing worthiness instead of remembering it. They are trying to become what they already are. And the kingdom within means the source is intimate. It is close. It is immediate. It is not somewhere else. It is here. It is now. It is in the breath. It is in the witness. It is in the deep place that knows even when the mind forgets. Let's talk about false worship. When people do not know the kingdom within, they tend to build false kingdoms outside. False worlds, false illusions. They worship institutions and they worship approval. And they worship power. And they worship image. They want to look good, but meanwhile, no, they're not. They want to worship fear. They want to worship certainty. And they worship anything that seems to promise safety, even if it costs them their soul. And this is not only about religion, it is about every structure that asks you to betray your inner knowing. Any system that makes you smaller to preserve itself to a false God. Any voice that demands you to abandon truth for belonging, it is a false God. Any identity that requires self-abandonment to maintain to a false God. The human being was never meant to bow to distortion. The human being was meant to remember source. And that is why awakening can feel like leaving a temple that never truly served the divine. It is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is return, perception, and reality. Philosophically, this is where the deepest question begins. What is real? What is the self, and what is a thought? What is identity, and what is truth? If perception can be shaped, then reality, as we experience, it is never as simple as it is first appears. We do not merely see the world, we interpret it, we filter it, we project it into it. And because of that, a person can stand in the same life for years and never notice they are living in a story, not in truth. That is why awakening begins with observation, not immediate judgment, observation. The ability to step back and ask, what is actually happening here? What am I feeling? What am I assuming? What am I repeating? What am I afraid to lose? What am I still trying to prove? And those questions are power. They break the trance, the false self. The false self is built from adaptation. It learns what gets approval, and it learns what gets safety. It learns what gets love, and it learns what gets attention, and it learns how to survive in the system. But survival, identities often become prisons. The performer becomes the identity. Caretaker becomes the identity, and overachiever becomes the identity. The rebel becomes identity. The wounded one becomes identity, and the strong one becomes identity. And then the person says, this is me, but no. This is what you built around what hurt you. That is not the same thing. The soul is beneath that. The soul is before that. The soul is still there when all the adaptations are removed. And when the false self begins to crack, it can feel terrifying. Because the ego believes dissolving means death. But often what is dying is only what never belonged to you in the first place. The real self. See, the real self is not loud in the same way. It does not need to dominate the room. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to control the narrative. It does not need to be chosen by everyone in order to exist. It simply is. That is the power of the true self. That is not built on reaction. It is not built on the shame. It is not built on performing. It is not built on presence. Presence is kind of prayer. Is a kind of prayer. Presence is a kind of surrender. Presence is the most when soul says, I no longer need to pretend. And when that happens, everything changes. Your voice changes. Your posture changes. Your boundary changes. Your relationship changes. Your body changes. Your perception changes. And you stop feeding what depletes you. You stop offering your life to things that cannot hold it. You stop living from the fear of being seen. And you begin to live from the truth that you were always already seen. Look at nature, man. See, the tree does not ask permission to root. The river does not apologize for flowing. The mountain does not panic because it is not moving fast enough. And the sun does not compare itself to the moon. Nature is an expression of belonging. And it does not question what it deserves to exist. It simply exists in alignment with what it is. Human beings, however, often forget this. We begin to believe we must earn our place. We must earn love, earn safety, earn worth, earn forgiveness, earn peace. But the deeper truth is that belonging is not earned by performance. It is remembering through alignment. Nature is not separate from the divine, neither are you. And as the truth hidden in plain sight, solitude and surrender. Solitude is one of the greatest teachers, not loneliness. Solitude, there is a difference. Loneliness is a pain, disconnection. Solitude is the space where disconnection can be healed. In solitude, the noise falls away. The performing falls away. The comparison falls away. The need to impress falls away. The soul finally has a chance to be heard. And that is why many people fear silence. Because silence reveals what distraction is hidden. But silence is not the enemy. Silence is the mirror. And if you stay with it long enough, you begin to realize that the thing you were most afraid of facing was not emptiness, it was truth. Remembering who you are is, I wrote about this in my book, Awaken, Return to Eden, is when I said, in the stillness of the desert, I found my truth. And that truth is that I am not broken. I am not separate. I am whole. I am free. And so are you. This is not just about my story. This is a declaration for anyone willing to receive it. You are not broken. You are not separate. You are not abandoned. You are not beyond return. You are not outside of grace. You are not cut off from source. You are not your trauma. You are not your fear. You are not your survival pattern. You are not the version of yourself that was formed under pressure. You are deeper than that. You are older than that. You are more eternal than that. There is a divine spark within you that has never stopped knowing the truth. And you're that. And the truth is this. You belong to the living mystery that made you. So this morning, let this be the invitation. Stop feeding the bloody distortion of negativity and chaos. Stop living as a prisoner in your home. And stop calling wounds your identity. Stop bowing to what diminishes you. Stop serving what fragments you, and stop measuring your worth by noise of the world and what you think the world wants you to fit in what kind of box. Be like the honey badger and don't give no shits. Stop measuring your worth by the noise that even people try to project into your world. There is a kingdom within you. There is a divine spark within you. There is a remembering within you. And the moment you stop seeing yourself as a prisoner, the prison begins to disappear. Not because the world changes first, because you did. This is the awakening. That is the return. That is Eden. And it has been waiting inside you all along.